in the middle of load shedding or not comfortable with something like that as well. And then I do have it as 1 minute past 11. Hi, Nix. It's nice to see you as well. Lebogang. Fantastic.
Hi, Nicola.
Hello, everyone.
Hi, Nick. Hi, team. Fantastic. I am going to do a little bit of an introduction just before I hand over to my colleague, Charlene. Charlene, I just want to say thank you for doing this. You're actually on leave, and it's her daughter's birthday today. So she's been baking cupcakes and getting ready for a party and for family. And luckily, she's been able to join as well. Hello, Marlies. It is absolutely wonderful to have all of you here today. And I do want to say, for those who've not been able to attend an open dialogue session, this is our third. This is very experimental still. This is a format that we're testing and trying due to the feedback that we've received from some of our independent consultants, but also other colleagues out there saying that sometimes it feels a little bit isolated, being out there trying to make decisions about different constructs and measurements and processes and stuff. And they don't always have a lot of people to bounce off ideas with. Now, with us at JVR, we often find ourselves in the middle of whether it's a Teams meeting or sometimes even still at the office, a debate or a little bit of a conversation around how we disagree with one another and sometimes how we do agree with one another as well on certain topics. So that is where the idea of open dialogue started, is we thought, you know what, this is not supposed to be salesy at all. This is not supposed to be a lecture at all. This is a space in our diaries that we're trying to create in which we can have certain conversations. And we had two, and this is now the third, and I do want to invite everybody to please take part in it. The idea is not for us to present something to you. The idea is for you to share your thoughts, your learnings, where you disagree, where you agree, where you've got concerns. If you're not comfortable unmuting yourself, please add it to the chat or send us an email. But it's really around the dialogue, and that is what is important for us. Charlene will be taking this one. It does help if somebody just gives it a little bit of a structure. Otherwise, I'll talk about my family and my kids the whole morning. So Charlene is taking this one, and she does give a little bit of a structure to it. But again, as I mentioned, this is different to any other presentation. The idea is for you to put up your hand at any point in time. You can rudely interrupt her, and you can mention, and you can take the conversation in a completely different way if you want to. So again, the idea is for us to learn from one another and just to have a space in which we can debate certain things. So Charlene, you've been at JVR for many years, more than a decade, and you're a research psychologist with the team, and you're one of those individuals who I know very open about the important role that EQ plays, not only in your professional life, but in your private life as well. And that is why we asked you to just talk us through your views, your findings of EQ and specifically performance. But again, as I said, this conversation can go any direction, depending on where the audience wants to take it. Thank you so much, Charlene.
Thanks, Yoni, for the introduction. Very, very welcome to everyone today. I'd like to start off with just getting a feel for what it is that is in your core role at work. I'd like to see who's perhaps doing a lot of coaching, or are you part of a selection process? Do you work a lot with developmental areas, helping employees to develop their career path? I'd like to get a feel for that. So please feel free to chat. That would be really awesome. Unmute yourself and chat, but please feel free to also just pop it in the chat box. So I'm going to give a few seconds just so that we can get a feel for who is involved in what. What is the major part of your role currently? Waiting for the chat box.
I'll go
Yeah, I'm
first.
trying.
Yay, Marlies.
The chat box working. So leadership coaching,
and development.
And when you say, I'm assuming also leadership development?
Yes.
Cool. Cool. Thanks for sharing, Catherine. Marlies, you also wanted to share.
Okay. Yeah, so I work mostly in terms of the psychometric assessment, focus as the specialist on that. So always used EQ for many years, and now starting it more in terms of the coaching and doing remeasures in terms of IDPs, that talent management. So yeah, I see quite a lot of a big need in terms of people focusing on EQ these days, more than in the past. So it's that engagement, and yeah, everybody is struggling. And so yeah, for me, EQ is standing out more and more in all the assessments that I'm doing. Yeah.
Thanks, Marlies. And just to confirm, when you're saying that it's there's a bigger need, is that need specifically from the employer's perspective?
Employees and the individuals that we work with, yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
so
and we're focusing, and more I'm pushing them to include EQ in all the IDPs in terms of whatever processes we can deal with that as well.
It's nice to hear that it's also coming from the employee's perspective,
Yes.
that they realizing, not necessarily being in the field of psychology and always being familiar with these constructs, but then also expressing their need for that. So it's a good feedback. It's nice to hear. Thanks, Yoni. I see selection. Anyone else who would like to share?
Maybe, just to comment on Marlies, what she's saying as well. We often, and it was said in a session we had last week as well, we sometimes, I think in the psychology as an industry, we come across weird and wonderful constructs that now is the most important thing, and you've I don't want to necessarily mention anything, but now agility is very important, and the next time something else is grit is important, and then tomorrow something else is very important, and then we tend to get back to the basics again as cognition, personality, etc. And a lot of criticism was, with Goleman's days in 1995 and even earlier, because I know some of the other social emotional developments were done prior to Goleman. Some people were saying that this is just a fad. It is going to pass. It's not going to be as important going forward. It is very similar to personality, etc. But it is unreal to see how critically important it still is, and even more so than I think it may have been 10 years ago with technology and people and the way in which we work, etc. So yes, Marlies, to your point, I also do think I'm seeing more EQ stuff than I've ever seen before.
Yeah, thanks. I'm not seeing any. Yes,
can I add something, Charlene? So we at JBL Solutions ran an EQ development program with our software development team, and they came back and said, provided them with such incredible value with regards to your self-management, but understanding also how to balance life and work. But I think it also creates within the team vocabulary and those development processes, whether it be EQ or personality, whatever the case, but certainly around EQ, allows a space then for people to admit when things aren't going so well, and to be vulnerable with one another, and work in an emotionally intelligent way as a team. So we're seeing some of that as well in the IT space, particularly the value there.
Thanks so much for sharing that, because it speaks so nicely. I'm going to touch briefly on the World Economic Forum a bit later, and it speaks so nicely. At the forefront, we all know this, at the forefront is technology for future job roles, and it's so fascinating to hear that feedback, that those people who have those skills, or we need those from a cognitive ability perspective, have the skills for that future list of work, and the impact of emotional intelligence and how it enhances them. So thanks for that. It's good to hear.
not only that, but then people having to deal and cope with new technologies so not the IT people, the normal employees who have to deal with working remotely, with managing your time, being assertive where you might not have had to have been previously, seeing a lot of that. The importance of EQ in managing that, and then some of the research around managers not knowing how to manage remote teams, and I think that also plays into it too. So I think the applications are endless.
Absolutely, and adapting to all of these changes from a technological perspective, as you said, but also then just from how our world of work changes. Before we even started talking about technology, and another thing, as you spoke, Nix, what that came to mind is how stressful that environment in technology is, because it's when the D-Day is there. I mean, I have zero experience or knowledge in technology. I just know when things need to go right, that's when things tend to go wrong. And that is when you really need those coping skills and communication skills. So I think I can just imagine how helpful these skills can be in that environment specifically.
Yeah, absolutely.
I would also like to get a feel just from the audience in which sectors we have a lot of representation today. I know we've got some IT representation here, so we have some of the technology. So I'd like, again, please share in which sector you work with a lot. Thanks, Nix, for the technology. Marilise, I don't want to, I've just had such a nice conversation with you. I'm fascinated which sectors you work with most.
We've got a few clients in different industries. So agriculture is one that's quite big now, and a little bit of mining and a little bit of in the medical field.
Thanks.
So I think that's the ones that keeps us busy the most at the moment.
Good to know. Catherine, if I may also ask, you shared also valuable feedback in your role. If I may ask, what industries you find yourself working with a lot? Okay, thanks. Banking, also banking, media, mining. Okay. So as Yoni said, we like to keep this informal and a discussion based, but I have a few slides just to ground us. There's a lot of terms that we'll be throwing around so that we are speaking from the same, that we are all on the same page. I thought it would help just to have a little bit of structure. And then let's see how far we get. Please feel free to interrupt me at any time. Bekiza has volunteered to keep an eye on the chat. So yeah, please interrupt as we go. I just now need to share my screen here. Why am I not finding it in Zoom? I'm not very used to. Oh, there we go, the green one. Okay. Can you guys see? I just want to.
Awesome.
Cool. And then I just want to test it is moving.
Yep.
Okay. So and just setting the scene a bit further for today, we've already touched on the importance of technology in the workplace. I've already referred to the World Economic Forum and their future job roles and the importance of which skills they consistently see through feedback from big organizations across the world and which they feel is increasing in importance. And there's a few that stood out for me, and they have a whole list, but a few that stood out for me from an EQ perspective that I think feeds really nice into EQ. And that is the resilience, flexibility, and agility, motivation and self-awareness, service orientation and customer service, empathy and active listening in the workplace, the ability to teach and mentor others, environmental stewardship. So there, for me, what stands out is that sense of social responsibility, global citizenship, And that curiosity and lifelong learning is another one that stood out for me. So I'm just briefly touching on a few, but I think we all, even just in our day-to-day work, we often come across these skills and the importance of it. And I think it just emphasizes that EQ has an important role when we look at these skills, and they are increasing in importance, and we should keep up with these. And really, given that the focus of this session is assisting people in that developmental path, these are important skills that we need to help them develop and maintain. Amongst those, I'm not going through the whole list, obviously, for the purposes of this. So in that list, we will definitely see the importance of ability. And I think we'll also see that personality certainly also plays a big role. We know also from research the predictive, what ability and personality and the predictive strength of that in work performance. So we're not taking away from that today. We're just saying that EQ is also playing a big role. So definitely identifying that ability and personality is important, and knowledge and skills. But our specific aim then for this session is on EQ. And then our stance is that EQ and personality is not exactly the same thing. And I think it's important, just so that we're all on the same page. We recently ran some analyses on EQ results and a personality Big Five factor test, because we were curious how much commonality is there between these two and between the results, and do they actually tell the same story, or is there some unique info that we can get from either personality or EQ? And yeah, we can certainly say that there's aspects that measuring EQ gives you over and above personality, and vice versa. So it's definitely, in our view, not the same construct. And we do believe that there's a time and a place for emotional intelligence, and looking at that as a separate construct. Then I think, just from our discussions already today, it's important to say that emotional intelligence isn't just important for your leadership roles. We know from experience and looking at our sales that measuring EQ is very helpful in your leadership roles, especially in the selection process, and it gives a lot of insight, and it certainly is a great tool, but that's not where it ends. And that there's really space, as Nicola has given such a beautiful example already, there's really space in teams and at all levels for this construct of emotional intelligence, and assisting people to help them cope better and help them perform better then in their job roles. Then I also want to mention what I'm going to touch on today is a very specific study of 108 employees, specifically from the finance and the professional service sector. So it's a very specific sample, and we're going to unpack some of the results just to bring up discussions and see what we have found. But it's not set in stone. And I would love to hear if you in your role see similar trends and similar findings, but certainly also very open if you perhaps see something else, because it might be that some of the results that we find could be sample specific. And so it doesn't mean what I'm putting up on screen here today is set in stone, and that is the only predictors of work performance. And I just wanted to open up the floor in that way, I don't want people to feel, okay, but then I don't want to contribute because I feel I have a different view or a different opinion. And that is quite important. So we welcome different experiences and examples. So please do share them. I would really appreciate it. So I've spoken a lot about EQ, and we've touched on work performance. Just want to take a sip of water. I just want to, again, if I speak EQ today and I speak job performance, what am I specifically referring to, so that we again on the same page? So when we speak EQ, we're specifically speaking about the EQI 2.0 model. This is the assessment that the sample of 108 people completed. So that is where we get our constructs from. I'm just going to give a very brief overview. of this model, just for the people who are not very familiar, so that when we unpack the results later on and we have a chat about it, you at least know where I'm coming from and how to interpret these constructs. So the self-perception composite, so you'll see that there's 5 composites making up your total EQ. And the self-perception, the first one there at the top, the self-perception refers to that inner self, understanding your own strengths, also realizing that you have weaknesses and accepting those. It speaks to your sense of self-confidence, and that self-actualization especially speaks to persistently wanting to improve yourself so that you can live your own best life. And then the emotional self-awareness, do you understand your own emotions? Where do they come from? And how they make you feel, and how that then impacts your thoughts and your actions. Moving on to the next composite, and the self-expression composite, moving clockwise, feeds directly or extends directly then from your self-perception. The self-expression speaks to how you express what we just spoke about. So all the emotions happening inside you, how do you express that openly to others? Are you able to do that both verbally and non-verbally? From an assertiveness perspective, are you able to share your thoughts, your ideas, your beliefs, stand up for those in a constructive, non-offensive way? And then independence, being able to make day-to-day decisions and emotional decisions without necessarily always have to check in with someone else, but having that independence and that confidence to make those decisions yourself. Then moving on to our next composite, the interpersonal, speaks to your interpersonal relations. So are you able to have mutually satisfying relationships? Goes both ways, where there's trust and compassion. From an empathy perspective, are you able to put yourself in other people's shoes? But importantly, are you able to articulate what you are hearing they are feeling and that they are experiencing, and that you can respect others' feelings? And then from a social responsibility perspective, being part of that greater good, doing good to more than just yourself. So your organization, your team, your direct community, your involvement from that regard. Then moving on to the decision-making composite. Here we're looking specifically at using emotional information when you need to make decisions. So from a problem-solving perspective, understanding that coming up with solutions where situations might feel emotionally loaded, good or bad, positive or negative emotions. Then that reality testing, understanding that your emotions might bring about biases and how you interpret a situation. And then based on that understanding, really trying your best to be as objective as possible about a specific situation. And then impulse control, resisting that temptation just to act before you think, or just to make quick decisions without just taking a moment to think things through. Then our final composite, stress management, how you cope with emotions associated with change and that unfamiliar situations and unpredictable situations. And then when things go wrong, that resilience, how you deal with setbacks, and remaining a positive outlook, even when you face hardship, knowing that no situation is permanent and then things will get better. Okay. Just want to check, is there anything in the chat or any questions or comments at this stage? Okay. Then when we speak work performance, we are looking at individual work performance. So just from a broad perspective, individual work performance as a concept is one of the most valued work-related outcomes in the field of psychology. And we have a brilliant assessment, the Individual Work Performance Review, that is a reliable and valid tool that looks at work performance. What's really exciting about this instrument is that it works across industries and across levels. So it is not an industry specific instrument, and it doesn't just look at certain levels within an organization. So then just very briefly, going to go over the 5 elements that this the IWPR looks at, again starting at the top and then moving clockwise. Your in-role performance is basically what is expected of you, making sure that what you do and what's needed from you in your role is done effectively and efficiently. Then moving on to that extra role performance, it's that voluntary acts, going that extra mile for the greater good of your team to reach and achieve those team goals, organization goals, even if it takes that little bit of extra. That's not necessarily always in your job role description. Then from an adaptive performance perspective, having the resilience when faced with a crisis or that uncertainty, but then also having that interpersonal flexibility as you work with others in the team or in the organization. And I think we've all had experiences of working with people who's very rigid and it's their way or the highway, and how challenging that is. So also just to mention then an important aspect of that adaptive element is having that sensitivity to know working with people to bring out the greater good of our goal, of our team goals and the goals of the organization. Then from a leadership, just skipping counterproductive, we'll come back to it at the end, but from a leadership perspective, leadership performance, this is being able to effectively influence your co-workers. So definitely not only for your leadership roles. We all have an aspect of leadership performance in our jobs. So it's not tied to authority, but how well do you support and connect with and direct your co-workers when working on specific projects? Then the counterproductive element, it's those acts by individuals, and these acts can be, people can be aware of what they're doing, but they can also not be aware of what they're doing. But these actions then both directly and indirectly, unfortunately, undermine the effectiveness of the team and can really take or halt projects and growth and again achieving that organizational success. Okay, just again, I would like to pause a second to ask if there's any questions or comments. Okay, so I'm first going to look at, and this is a study, we can drop the reference in the chat as well. So as I mentioned, this was a sample of 108 employees from the finance and professional sector. And so these employees completed the EQI themselves, and then their managers rated them on the IWPR. And I'm specifically mentioning that because we know also from Research International, consistently your manager ratings is what really predicts work performance best. If it's a self-rating, it can potentially be a bit inflated. So I think it is worth mentioning here that it was managerial ratings from a job performance perspective. So what we've done here is we have looked at the overall EQ. So this is just an overall EQ score, so not looking at composite levels yet, but the overall EQ and what is the impact of overall EQ then on our 5 job performance as outlined by the IWPR on those elements. And for overall job performance, just to also mention here, the number that you're seeing in brackets is your validity estimate, so your correlation coefficient of overall EQ, and then the impact that it has on these different areas of job performance. And what you'll see here, so looking at the different scales of the IWPR, you'll see the highest number there is leadership performance. So overall emotional intelligence had the strongest impact on leadership performance. Second to that, the adaptive performance, and then extra role performance from a positive effect. Then in-role performance, and then finally extra role performance. And then, not surprisingly, general EQ has a significant negative effect on counterproductive performance. So I think it makes quite sense. So what I'm going to do next is I'd like to go into the different elements of job performance and which composites best predicted these different areas of performance. And I'm again going to open the floor again. So what we like to do in our team when we start out before we analyze our results is we like to play around with some ideas and ask around, what do we think will best predict a certain outcome? So if we look at in-role performance, just again, the reminder, so it's that effectiveness and efficiency with which employees perform their daily activities. So I'd like to hear some hypotheses, which composites. So just I'm asking specifically at a composite level, so your self-perception, your interpersonal, your decision-making, stress management, not necessarily looking at the subscales within each composite, but just at a broad composite level, hypotheses of which composites you believe will have the biggest impact on in-role performance.
I know that I've seen this, but I'm really honest in saying that that I can't recall the detail in terms of what the actually correct answer is. But I would have gone with decision making if this was my first hypothesis.
Cool. Share some thoughts on that, Johan, please.
Okay.
Why? Why do you say decision making?
For me, it goes towards the effectiveness and efficiency. So this is, am I doing my job and I'm doing it correctly? Not whether I'm too much worried about my colleagues and peers. It's more to the task, in role, the actual day-to-day operational, what's expected of me. And that's why decision making to some extent is towards the step-by-step problem solving, efficiency, decision-making process, I don't know, just that's what I would have
problem solving. Okay, good. Okay, I like it.
Catherine, you calling me on exactly the T there, I saw.
Okay, interpersonal stress management. Thanks for that. Any other shots?
I also kind of know your answers and what the analysis was saying, Charlene, but I thought that self-perception would be a little bit higher. Like if you had, and I know you're not talking facets, but if you motivated and had that self-actualization to want to be the best, that's going to make you more motivated to like be effective and do it efficiently and get it right the first time, because you're confident in yourself and you want everybody else to be confident in you. So yeah, thought all of them were actually quite important. But Catherine, would love to. You're also saying just all the scales should factor in some way.
Yeah, once you start unpacking these, you want to go with, no, they're all important. So that's why it's important what we do, right? From a statistical perspective. Marlies, I would love, if you are willing to share, I'd love your thoughts.
I think first thing that came to my mind was decision making and stress management.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any specific reason that you would like to add that hasn't been discussed?
Well, agreeing with Jani in terms of the decision making, maybe just adding with the stress management, the stress tolerance that came out there for me in terms of you need to get the job done. Effectiveness and efficiency, are they coping under the pressure? And the optimism going with it. If they succeed and still learning, and they bounce back and continue. That was the two, just gut feeling.
Cool. Anyone else wanting to add something before I do the big reveal? Okay. So I think you guys don't need me or us from a research perspective. You are quite spot on. So just looking, so what we did, I don't want to go into too much stats jargon, but for this specific study, we did a dominance analysis, and all you have to take home from that is it allows us to see which of the composites predict the most variance in each of our areas that we look at in performance. But with dominance analysis, what makes it so nice, it's less of an interference from a multicollinearity aspect. So it looks at from a more pure perspective, if I can put it in layman's perspective, and then just the numbers for those who are interested in numbers. I don't want to go too much into it, but that R is squared that you see in brackets every time is the proportion of explained variance of each predictor. And remember now, this is just looking at EQ. So these numbers look quite high. This isn't just in general. We are now looking at the EQ pi specifically. So if we take our EQ pi and we look at which composites, then those are the numbers. But let's speak the language that we are here for speaking, and you will see that you guys are quite spot on with the predictions that yes, stress management was the most important one. So well done, Marlies, your gut feel there. Stress management is so important, and Catherine, I know you also mentioned stress management is really important when it comes to in-roll performance, or at least it was for the sample. That is what we found here. And then decision making also playing a big role. And then yes, Gies, that self-perception, that self-actualization, that wanting to be the best that you can be, also played a big role. So yes, you guys clearly have a good feel for this. I think that I can't imagine. Is there any comments, objections?
So
Challenges.
maybe just a comment, and what you're saying here, from my perspective, not being a research psychologist myself, is that if I were, let's say, for argument's sake, Catherine, working with a manager in a coaching process, the coaching initiated due to a little bit of a performance management issue that they have with this manager, and him not doing his job or what is expected of him. So it's a little bit of a difficult situation that she finds herself in, for argument's sake, Catherine. If she's only got 6 sessions with him and limited the time that she wants to be impactful, start with stress management and then decision making instead of possibly, I mean, we need to understand the context of the client, etc., etc. I'm not saying ignore everything, but what we are saying is that if in-role performance is an area that's a concern, stress management would likely have a big impact if you were to develop that area for that individual, help to develop that area, or at least start at that area instead of trying to cover everything from EQ.
Yes, absolutely. And I think I am quite excited to see self-perception there, because we do know from the EQ theory, it's difficult. It really makes working on the other composites difficult if self-perception needs development. So yes, that would typically be, if the self-perception is in a good range, then definitely I would indicate working with that stress management and decision making, and see how that can then impact that in-role performance.
Okay. I mean, we'll never ignore your valleys and your highs. You meaning for that specific individual, there might be other areas identified as a development area more so than others. But to have this as a coach in the back of your mind, knowing that these 3 are quite important, it would definitely help in your angle and your approach and your exercises identified, etc.
Yes, and I think especially in practice, which I don't have that view, and I can't come in with that stance, but I can imagine how exciting it would be to see this play out in practice. So perhaps someone who does have a lower score on in-role performance, if we look at the EQ results, what do we see there? Does it actually speak to what we found in the sample? And if it is, then it's like that aha moment, and it immediately gives you something to work with.
Yeah, Charlene, I'm also thinking, especially if your self-perception's really high and you think you're amazing and good at your job, and your manager or your colleagues perhaps don't think so much. So that's the maybe reality testing comes in there.
Yes,
but really, I
was going to say, imagine.
Understanding you know, or yeah, testing. I can't think of the other word, but giving you an idea of how you actually show up to others. Is that a true reflection actually of where you stand, or do you perhaps need a little bit of self-awareness that goes with that self-perception? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, Nix. And I can imagine if your reality testing is perhaps also with that a bit of a problem. So you have that inflated self-perception, and it's not always in check with reality. Absolutely, how they speak to each other. Okay, I'm going to ask, can someone just tell me the time? I don't have time on me. Just want to be
22. You have 20 minutes left.
Okay, let's get through. Okay, so same exercise for extra role performance. So just a reminder, it's that voluntary acts that you do to benefit your co-workers, to benefit your team, so that we can get an awesome project out, going that extra mile. What are the thoughts on this? Predictions?
Interpersonal.
Interpersonal. Okay, you want to elaborate, Jan?
It talks to the composite, you know, interacting, identifying what others may need, where they are at, when they need help, go a little bit beyond what is expected of you to, you know, assist the team type of thing.
Empathy for the co-worker that's sitting with a big project. How can I help? It might not be my project, but I'd like to assist and bring my expertise. Yeah. Any other predictions?
I think
Yes, interpersonal, but stress management as well.
I think to add on to Nicola's comments on the previous one, someone with like a very high assertiveness or high independence, not my job, but not voluntary. So I think maybe the too high self-expression might negatively influence the extra role.
Interesting insight, definitely. Any other
I
thoughts?
reckon with the high self-expression, just to tag on to Keeza's comment, there would be you're telling people all the extra things you're doing. Potentially,
Yes.
then they do it all the time. But I'd also say the self-perception, I know we're not going into the facet level, but the self-actualization, you just want to do more, contribute more, become more of, or reach your potential.
Yeah, going that
extra.
extra mile, it feeds back into your own growth. Yeah, nice insight. Okay, I'm going to give it 2 more seconds. If there's anyone else that would like to add. So we had some self-perception, self-expression, and then stress management, and then interpersonal. Let's see. So very similar, maybe just in different order, but very similar to what we saw in role performance. Again, decision making coming up highest, so your best predictor for extra role performance, and then stress management, and then again that self-perception. So same composites that we're seeing playing out and explaining most of the variance of what we see in the extra role performance. So we are starting to see a trend here if we look at what the results are saying.
But it's interesting that the interpersonal stuff's not leaping out here.
Absolutely. And I think for that, we did like I said, we always do this exercise, and it is actually written up, where in our hypotheses we were like, yes, definitely interpersonal is going to be a big one, and then came the results, and it's interesting to see this, that it
research
keeps us on our toes.
I wonder if it's a symptom of the SOC, meaning if you were to look at a more junior level employee, possibly, you know, and I'm not sure, but a more junior level employee where the interpersonal may have then played a bigger role versus your professional management level, that extra role performance is possibly more towards effectivity, efficiency, and I don't know, maybe it looks different to them, but I also don't want to hog. I know we don't have a lot of time left and there's still quite a lot to go through.
But absolutely, and the impact that different areas have, if we work with customer service, might it look different, for example.
And to Andrew's point, I remember we make use of management ratings, which is so the manager's perception of their extra role performance versus if you were to ask subordinates whether this individual actually shows extra role and helpful behaviors, it might have been slightly different in their perception.
Very good point, because managers might only see high level kind of outputs, and where in the team you see the unseen. So even though it didn't necessarily directly feed into an output, it was that colleague that helped you when you had a crisis. Very true. Very, very good insight. Okay, then adaptive performance. So just a reminder, this is speaking to the employee's resilience to perform when they deal with a crisis or an unpredictable or situation, or when there's uncertainty. And remember that it also reflects very well on that interpersonal flexibility when working with co-workers. So understanding people have different views, different ways of doing things. So let's go with the predictions, the hypotheses. Jana, I don't want to, I don't want to like call you out if you're not comfortable to share, but you always have such valuable insights, Jana. If you would like to share, I know you have quite experience with the EQ.
Before Jana go, I just want to say stress management in my mind would definitely need to play a role here.
It almost speaks, if we look at the definitions from our stress management composite, and we look at some of the definitions in the adaptive performance, I hear you, there's already a theoretical link. Anyone else?
I think the easy one is the stress management, but I would imagine with the interpersonal might come into play more here, just because of that resilience factor that comes from other people, or drawing on other people, helping other people, needing help yourself, under those conditions of change. Be interesting to see, because I don't know all the results, so
yeah,
we'll see.
Interesting. So we've got stress management, interpersonal. Anyone else like to share? Okay.
Yeah, I'll add both, and also maybe self-perception.
Self-perception.
Yeah, if you've got the self-regard standing out,
Yeah.
I mean, all comes together.
Yep, it's the fun of EQ, especially. Okay, let's look what the results said. So again, we're seeing the same three composites, again, shifting a bit, especially that stress management and decision making, but stress management coming up as the strongest indicator, then decision making and your self-perception, what it is. So absolutely. So we're definitely picking up on a trend, and yes, we also can't help to wonder how sample specific this is. So very excited to have opportunities to look at more samples and getting more insights into this. So our second last one, leadership performance. So again, just a reminder, it's that effectiveness with which an employee can influence their co-workers, how they direct them, support them, and connect with them in ways to have an outcome in a project. And remember that it's not only your leadership roles, but this sits with every employee in the organization. What predictions do we have for this one?
Same three.
Thank you. You have Kleinian saying self-expression and decision-making.
Okay, self-expression, decision-making. And then Jan, same 3, just because you're playing lotto, or just a guess, or
The trend.
yeah. So let's see what.
I'd be
Oh.
super surprised again. I'm just trying to get poor interpersonal is not reflecting well, but because of the influence component of leadership, I'd be surprised if it doesn't come up.
Yeah, so exactly to Nix's and Jan's point. Again, the same 3 coming up. So decision making, stress management, and then your self-perception. So these are coming out very strongly, and I like how you just said poor interpersonal, Andrew. So we're wondering what's happening there, and again, can't help but wonder if it is a sample specific trend. But yep, this is again the trend that we're seeing.
Charlene, I'm thinking these 3 talk very much to self-management, right? So it's your stress management, your interpersonal, I mean, your impulse control and how you make decisions, and your you know, expressing or the way, you know, the way that you see yourself. So I wonder to what extent it has to do with that that sort of core aspect of managing yourself in the workplace, rather than the others not necessarily being important.
Yes. No, it's fascinating because and this is just my own take on this as well, is so from a self-perception perspective, that confidence, you know, do I have enough confidence? I understand my strengths, but I also understand where my weaknesses are and where I might need help. So just a better understanding of that can help you perform better. And then in that decision making, having that reality testing, how important that is to get the output that we need to get, that impulse control. I mean, this we know, if I can't allay the urge to not sit and finish a project, then it's not going to get done. So how that will play into completing the task, getting projects done, problem solving, I think that speaks a lot to work performance as well. And then that stress management, people might have the confidence, they might have a good understanding of their own strengths and where they can add value, but if they struggle with that stress management and they are kind of, when stress happens, they freeze to a point that it delays a project, or they struggle getting things out, we can understand how that might really affect your work performance. So definitely interesting insights.
And you didn't show a sort of a profile of what the sample looked like before, but I'm also thinking often with leaders, these are the 3 that tend to stand out with in your executive. I think research that Images has done years and years and years ago, the combination is always your self-regard, self-actualization, lower even on the interpersonal side of things, but yeah, stress management being and your decision making, problem solving aspect higher as well. So I don't know if that is what the profile looks like, but
yeah, so it's not a strong emphasis on leadership roles specifically, but I do believe that the professional, being that a large set of our sample had the professional employees in it, I think it does have an impact on that as well. So yes, then our last one, so the counterproductive performance, those things that employees do, maybe they are aware of it, maybe they're not aware of it, but it does have a direct and or indirect impact on the effectiveness of outcomes in the team and working towards the goals. So
maybe just a comment here. This is often so enormously difficult to capture in a performance review to some extent, or to address in a team, or and the problem with this performance dimension is that they often do their work, so you know, efficiently enough. The end role performance are often, you know, you can't really necessarily pinpoint anything they're doing what is expected of them. But yes, that there's just the difficult toxicity, resistance, pessimism that goes along with working in a team with this individual. So the IWPR picking up on counterproductive performance is so critically important to capture it as it is, or as a dimension. Yes, and I would again with this one say many, if not all, relates to counterproductive performance, and the inverse of it, meaning and possibly also then to Nix's point earlier, and I'm not sure if that's been looked at, but the too much of a good thing again as well, possibly having a negative impact on certain behaviors as well.
Okay, so Jon, you said you're feeling a strong one for most of the composites. Any specific feedback? I can open the chat as well here. Low self-awareness. Catherine, I just want to confirm it is for the counterproductive one. Okay. Jon, yes. Same 3. Andrew saying sometimes difficult to see immediately. Yes. Quiet quitters as an example. Very, very good point. Sorry, Jon. I saw your sign language. I just
said 3 minutes left.
3 minutes. Okay. So let me get.
I sometimes pick up social responsibility. If there's a low score there, then there's a question in. Yeah. So, but yeah, I'm very skeptical. I'm still trying to figure that out. The lowest score on social responsibility. Yeah. So maybe interpersonal
plays a big role. Well, based on our trends, when no surprise, but again, decision making, stress management, and that self-perception that came out. So yes, I think with those 3 composites, they definitely stand out. If we look at I'm going to, that's the end of the results section. And I think those 3 definitely stand out without a doubt, at least in the study. So thank you for the participation and the ideas. And I really hope that it gives us something to work with, and a bit of depth in interpreting EQ results and helping with that development in the different job roles, even though we saw such a strong trend in the different job roles and not necessarily a different picture for each of us. It is good insights to have, I believe.
Charlene, was that just negative correlations?
Yes,
obviously.
yes, sorry. Yes, that was a negative.
Just checking. I just wanted to make sure everyone knew that.
Thanks, Nix. Very, very good point. So that was a negative regression, yes.
Okay. I do want to highlight, so Catherine, you asked earlier for research. I think we shared the JOPA article that was published earlier this year, if I'm not mistaken. There's the research that Charlene used this morning, also available in a PDF format that we can send through on the case study that was written up with the IWPR. And then a comment that I made that I just want to orientate everybody to is that we did update the ASSA manual, the EQI manual. It's been submitted to the ASSA for review as well. We've not officially launched the manual due to the fact that we want to align with our norms and the technical changes to the EQI that will be coming in terms of our connection with MHS. And we want to actually launch the manual together with that, but the manual is available. So for you guys who wants to orientate you to the work that was done on construct validity with the BTI and the EQI, etc., we can send that through, noting that it's the new manual. It's not launched yet. It is currently being reviewed by the ASSA, but I do think you guys might find it interesting as well. A lot of work has gone into it. I know we're on the dot at 12 and it's a Friday afternoon. I hope you guys can put your Bok jerseys on now and have a beer over the weekend, if that's appropriate to say. And thank you for joining the open dialogue session. Charlene, thank you so much. I know you're on leave today, and the fact that you actually took us through some of the work that you've done, which is fantastic. So appreciate everybody's attendance, Marlies and Catherine, everybody
Yes,
that so
thanks.
interacted, really appreciate it. Enjoy the weekend and talk to you soon.
Have a good one, everyone. Thanks for all the participation. It was a good one.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Enjoy.
Thank
Bye.
you. Dr. Catherine.
Load shedding's off.
Dankie Estie vir alles.